answers. Easter seals today.
Thank you for joining us here again on Easter Seals today. I'm Carol Gault, and I'm here with Rhonda Logsdon from Kentucky Spin, and we're in the third segment of 3 segments, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, I guess, I've had all my notes here, and it's gotten a little confusing, but it's going to be special education process and eligibility.
Yes, we'll kind of pick up from there. And one of the things, which in the second part we had talked about the evaluation. Then when you get to the eligibility, as I had mentioned earlier, there are different categories that a child can qualify under. So one of the things that parents wonder, now that there's an evaluation, okay, so how do I know then what happens next? So what will happen is after the evaluation is done, there will be what's called an eligibility meeting, or as we had mentioned in the other parts, it's an IEP or ARC meeting. If the child is going to qualify, typically they're going to hold the eligibility meeting, and then also in the same meeting just go ahead and start working on the IEP for the child, or they may call it the ARC, the Admissions and Release Committee meeting. And what that is the child will qualify under the different categories. And one of the things I want to point out, just as I had mentioned in the other parts, is under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, you have, if the disability is proven to affect the child educationally, there are different categories that a child can qualify. And one of the areas where Kentucky goes above and beyond in favor of the child, as I had mentioned, you'll see on the chart on the screen, the reason that it's broke down, which shows you the federal IDEA categories and the CARA, the Kentucky Administrative Regulation categories, is so that you can see, especially if you look under the federal, one of the categories is emotional disturbance. And then in Kentucky, when IDEA was reauthorized, Kentucky kept, which helped a lot of our children, the category emotional behavioral disability. And one of the things is that helps a lot of our children. So Kentucky went above and beyond and also included in there the behavioral disability for that category. And also you will note too that the developmental delay category, the age 3 through 8, is the same, and a lot of the categories are the same. One thing that I want to mention on this, because there are a lot of categories that a child can qualify. On our second screen, it'll show where there is the other health impaired category, and a lot of times parents wonder, well, what is that? Now that could be things like ADD, ADHD, Tourette's syndrome, severe asthma, severe diabetes. The thing to keep in mind is with any of this is that it's been proven, and if the child qualifies, that it educationally affects the child. So there is that other health impaired category that some children can qualify under, which might be the most appropriate. It's important to know that there are categories so that the child will qualify, but the category should not dictate the program for the child. And what I mean by that is, in the other segment, as I had mentioned, what works for one person with cerebral palsy is not going to work for another person with cerebral palsy. The key to this, in the way that the law is written, is this is to be individualized and appropriate for that child and what is best for the child. So those are key things to keep in mind there.
So these 2 slides just simply showed some categories where they were eligible.
Yes.
And then after that, someone kind of explains the evaluation data during eligibility.
Meeting, yes. There is to be someone there who can explain that data to the family and really what's going on there and everything. And that would be a point too, as we had mentioned, if you're not in agreement with the evaluation, you can always request that independent education evaluation, the IEE. And typically if the child qualifies, then you're going to go ahead and you will start writing the IEP.
Okay. And what if the child is not eligible?
Okay, well, there are several things that you can keep in mind. Okay, think about, was the child evaluated under the correct category? Because sometimes we talk with families that Okay, they weren't evaluated where you get that whole big picture of the child. So making sure that any evaluations outside of school are taken into consideration as the evaluation, and making sure that there was not just one single piece of evaluation that measured if they qualified or not, because it is to be a collective effort. Now, if the child does not qualify, and it may be that it's not proved that their disability educationally affects them, then what will happen is there is also, to throw another thing out there that could confuse you, is there's what's called a 504 plan. Now, 504 is not a specific education law. That is based on the civil rights. 504 is not just for education, it's for the workplace. It is for persons with disabilities to be afforded the same opportunities as others. It could be the workplace. This is under the civil rights law. And that would be a plan. One of the things that we always recommend is if a child qualifies, and could qualify under IDEA, for them too, because it is a specific education law. And also, when the child qualifies under that, that also brings funding, more funding to the school that will help them to educate your child and through this program. And under a 504, there's not. But it's always good to, you know, if they don't qualify for this, but they do need to have something in place, is a 504 plan. And we can get you more information on 504 too.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to one of the things that you've talked a lot about, which is an IEP and the IEP team.
Yes.
Because you've even talked about how the child needs to be a part of that.
Yes, and it is very key that everyone is an equal member of the team. Parents, the child, if appropriate and age appropriate and based on their disability. You know, it is very key that everyone involved with the child be involved in an equal member of the team. This, you know, I'm talking, you know, not just the special education teacher, but the regular education teacher. Anyone working with a child, if it's a therapist, those are all key members to the team. We always recommend, even if there's someone that your child may be seeing a therapist outside of school or different things like that, that they be included in that team, because it's very key for our children to have consistency. And it's a good opportunity for parents to share what they're doing at home and what they found that works and doesn't work, and for school too. So you have that carryover from home to school, and then, you know, if they're in therapy or anything like that outside of school. So.
And IEP and ARC, as you mentioned, are
yes,
interchangeable?
You may hear it called IEP Team, ARC Team, Individual Education Program, and ARC Admissions and Release Committee meeting. They're all one and the same in Kentucky. You know, a lot of times it is considered the ARC Team, or we're going to have an ARC meeting. Now, the key thing here to keep in mind, and you know, is that the basis that is going to start things off right is making sure that there's an accurate evaluation, because the data found there you're going to use then to write the IEP. So.
Well, and let's just say that I have a child and I'm starting in on this process, and we're going to have an IEP meeting, and I do want to bring that therapist to the meeting, or I do want to bring a family member who's a teacher and has more familiarity with IEPs. May I bring someone to that meeting with me?
Yes, you can. What we always suggest is, just like with the school, it's just a courtesy to let the school know that you're bringing, you know, so-and-so with you. We always recommend that just having someone else, just the support there with you, you know, a spouse, a friend. A lot of times we'll suggest parents team up with one another and just go as a support to one another. Now, one of the things I do want to bring up, we do not attend IEP meetings for families, so I do want to make sure that's clear, but we can help step you through the process before and after and during if you have questions, things like that. But it is key to have people, even if they're not within the school, to bring them, because it's just a support system, and also, just as you said, they may have expertise that is very valuable to that team. And parents know their child better than anyone else, and they are such a crucial role to the IEP process and team.
Okay, all right, great. And I believe that we have another slide that talks about the steps in writing an IEP.
Yes, and this is key. Like, I love the visual, you know, is that you see that your evaluation is your foundation. And then the next thing, when you go to write the IEP, because it can get so overwhelming, one of the things that we suggest too is Write down any things that you want to make sure you bring up in the meeting. You know, making sure that you've kind of thought through some different things. Now, the present level of performance is what's going to be looked at first. And what this is they're going to go through academic, social, communication, different key areas, which is part of the present level of performance. And you want to make sure that that is an accurate picture of your child, because the whole rest of your IEP is going to be based off of that. And what they're going to do is, in that present level of performance, they're going to be how that is gauged is with similar age peers. So if there's an area in communications that needs to be addressed, you want to make sure that that's noted in there, because that's what's going to guide then your writing of your goals and objectives, because you're going to know what to address.
Okay, all right. And so goals and objectives should be on the IEP, correct?
Yes, that is going to be, once you do your present level of performance, you're going to look at goals and objectives. There will also be some questions in there, maybe before that, about, does your child require a communication? Is there visual? Do they have difficulty with visual? Different things like that. So you want to make sure that those things are accounted for. Do they have transition needs? Some children have trouble transitioning just from the classroom to lunch. So there are things that you want to keep in mind there. Now, when you look at your goals and objectives, because we get questions a lot, well, what is a good goal and objective? Well, there is not one set standard, because it is to be what is best for your child to be educationally successful and what's appropriate for your child. So you should not have goals and objectives. All children who qualified under the autism category are not going to have the same goals and objectives. You know, and you want to make sure that it is individualized for your child. If maybe that the area that was identified in the present level of performance was social, in interacting with their peers, then if that's, you've already documented that that is a concern or somewhere that we need to work on, you want a goal that will address that. One of the good examples I can give you that I thought was a brilliant idea of a speech therapist working with a child was that, and the child has autism, and so he needed help interacting with his peers and adults. You know, so it didn't help him to have his speech therapy sitting in a room just with the speech therapist away from everyone else. So the work that they did was go out actually in the classroom and help to engage the child with other children and be working in, you know, not just staying isolated from everybody, but actually working as a team with their similar age peers. So really kind of thinking outside of the box and looking at what's appropriate for them, because that works wonderful for him, because that's the area that he needed help with.
So what I'm hearing are very personalized and
Yes.
individualized
Yes.
goals.
Yes, and that's key. And you want to make sure they have to be measurable, because if you can't measure them, you're not going to know where he or she is at. If they're not meeting it, you know, maybe we need to rethink our strategy we're using. So maybe not waiting a whole year to have another meeting, because you will have an IEP meeting at least annually to review and update your IEP. But if you see, based on, because you'll get progress reports, and you want to make sure that you're keeping that to where it is, you know, something may not be working. You don't want to go the whole year with something that's not working.
Okay.
So,
all right. Well, we're going to take a break here, and then we'll come back to discuss
Okay.
more in just a minute. But thank you, Rhonda, and join us in just a few minutes, and we'll be right back with you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us here again. And now we're going to talk again with Rhonda about who will implement the IEP.
Yes, of course, as we've talked about, that it is a team effort, and the team will work together. It will show, and what's important on the goals and objectives is to make sure that it states who is going to, just as I had said, they have to be measurable.
Right.
So it's going to be stated who is going to be the one responsible to measure that. How is the program, the goals and objectives to be implemented? Who is responsible? It's clear, it needs to be clear so that everyone knows who's responsible, so there's no miscommunication of who is actually going to implement this part. So the clearer that you can be, the better it will be for the child.
Okay, and how do you monitor a child's progress?
Well, you can request that, and one of the key things when you have the IEP meeting, of course, you know how we had the picture to where it showed your goals and objectives and all the different things. There's also a part that is called the conference summary of the IEP. Anything that wouldn't automatically fit in other areas that needs to be to be documented, you want to put it in there. Say if you are wanting, for some families, they kind of want to make sure that they have a weekly update. Is my child missing any work? Are they missing any homework? Has it not been turned in? Sometimes children need to be prompted, okay, it doesn't make it from home to school, and we need to figure out what's kind of going on. So it's really needs to be individualized. You should get a progress report on the goals and objectives when all children, and when you would get your report card, just like every other child in school, that should also be a part of that. But you can make sure that the communication is open to where you know if there's something that's missing or different things, or you can have written in there that you will be updated every, so often, so that you're staying on top of it, so that you know if, say, something's not working, as we had explained, well, then you're going to know, well, if it's not working, maybe we need to try something else. So, just what is individualized for that child. So there is no right or wrong here, or you have to at certain times.
Okay, and do all children receive accommodations and modifications?
No, only children who, and there is a section for accommodations and modifications, only children who need those. I can give you an example. There are different things like scribes, readers, different things like that. The children who receive the accommodations are the children, these accommodations are to allow them to compete competitively with their peers. Okay. So this is not to give them an upper hand in any way, but this is what's going to allow them. And an example I can give you, my brother Grant, who is technically legally blind, but with his cerebral palsy, he can't do Braille. So he always had a reader who could read it, and Grant would dictate the answer to the person. So he would have a reader and a scribe. So really individualizing it for the child, and if it's appropriate. Because, if they don't need it, it doesn't need to be filled out. So not every child, they're not all going to look the same.
I got it.
So.
Okay. Let's talk about placement for just a minute.
Okay. Now, I do want to mention one thing that I did forget, sorry about that.
No.
Is that there is a very key place to make sure, and typically it's found in the area where modifications and accommodations will be marked. There will be an area that says child has been determined eligible for alternate portfolio assessment. The thing to be aware of here is, in Kentucky, we have you either a diploma or a certificate bound student. Now, if that box is marked, a child is certificate bound, because you cannot qualify if you're a diploma bound student for an alternate portfolio assessment. And what that means is, and what I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of, because that is such, that is a huge decision that's being made for the child. Because for most jobs, if you don't have a diploma or a GED, you can't get the job. And a certificate of attainment's not going to suffice for that. Because, we've had some families, they're ready for their child to go on to college, or different traits, different things like that, and a certificate is not going to fit those requirements. So just so that families are aware that that's what it means. Now, when the child gets around 14 or before, that it will specifically state diploma or certificate track. But a nice way to be able to tell is, if that is marked, child has been determined eligible for alternate portfolio assessment, that is a certificate bound student. but know that it can always be changed, and it should be something that is looked at annually at the IEP meeting.
And so those are discussions they need to have early on.
Yes, yes, and making sure that it's clear what track that the child is working towards, and all children should get a diploma if they're able to get a diploma, and what can we all do working together to make that happen.
Okay.
So, and then the next area, I know I got you off track.
No, that's okay. That's all right. It's just, you know, when you're not familiar like you are
Yeah.
on a daily basis, there's a lot of ground to cover
there
here.
is.
And for a layperson like me, it's you know, and
It can be
probably
very
the audience.
overwhelming,
Yes,
yes.
it can be very
Yeah.
overwhelming. So there's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
We've got
Now
good notes, and this is a lot of good information for the audience. So
Well,
certainly.
And
But-
the placement is what is best and appropriate for the child. As I had mentioned in the other segments, you're not going to know the child's placement until the very end, and that should not be something that's decided up front, because the placement's going to be decided based on their goals and objectives, and where are you going to be able to implement those, and what is appropriate for the child, keeping in mind the LRE, the least restricted environment, so that all children are educated in the regular education setting unless it's decided that's not what's appropriate for the child. Some children, if they're not the whole day in regular education, they may go out for resource for like an hour, or, you know, based on what's appropriate for the child, to work on some maybe very specific goals and objectives or one-on-one help that they might need. So.
Okay. All right. And how often does the IEP ARC team meet? We talked about that just a little bit.
Yeah, they do annually.
And how they,
yeah,
but they can request meetings.
Yes, and that's
more
important because
frequently.
we get a lot of questions about that. Anyone can request an IEP meeting at any time, and that's key to keep in mind, because as we had said before, you don't want a whole year to go by if you never know, because some children, things may change. There may be some things that come up that they may even need an evaluation sooner, because once you have that initial evaluation, you receive an evaluation every 3 years. Now, for some children, they may need one sooner than that if there's been some things change. The thing to keep in mind too, that I do want to, not to further confuse things, but to let you know that every 3 years a child will be reevaluated, unless, and this is in the law, that the IEP team agrees to adopt the previous evaluation as the current, and then that will serve as the current one, because for some children there's no need to retest them. You know, my brother's cerebral palsy and vision never changed. There was no need, and the whole IEP team agreed that this still gave an accurate picture of him. Now, for a lot of children, that doesn't work. So you will have the reevaluation every 3 years or sooner. So keeping that in mind, and you can request an evaluation. And if you don't agree again with the reevaluation, you have the right to the Independent Education Evaluation, the IEE, that you can request too. Now, with the IEP meeting, like you had said, you can request that at any time. So it's key not to always be requesting it, but to know that it is there, and sometimes you just need to get everybody together to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, we have just a few minutes left, and I
Okay.
want to go over just a few things about how they can contact you and where this information will be
Yes.
found. But before we do, procedural safeguards and resolution of if someone were to have a dispute.
Yes.
Let's just briefly touch on that.
Okay. If you want to first talk with your teacher or your principal. The next thing is to request an IEP meeting, to have the whole team there and to address this. The key thing here is that even if everybody's not in agreement, as a parent, you want to make sure that it's documented in the conference summary that you're not in agreement, and that this is what you're not in agreement for, and that you have requested this. So documentation is key here. Then if you don't get resolved, then, and that's a school-based ARC meeting, then you can have like what they call AARC, which is an administrative level ARC meeting, and you see on the diagram that that's when you would want the special education for the district to be involved, or someone that they appoint. Now, if you don't get resolved there, and again, you have to document it in the conference summary that you did not get it, so it is documented, then you have the right to request mediation, but both parties have to agree to that, the school and you. Or there is the right to file a formal complaint and then due process. We always recommend the least amount of steps that you have to go through, the best although you still want to have the best for your child because your child still does have to go to school, and you want to try to build that partnership. That doesn't mean that you're always going to agree.
I understand, yes.
But it is very key, the least amount of steps that you can go through to get resolved and get what your child needs the best.
Okay.
So, but those are there for you just for the purpose, though, that you can get resolved if you're not at one level.
All right.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Rhonda. You have been a wealth of information. I mean,
well,
you're so
you.
knowledgeable, and I know that the partners at Easter Seal are so thankful to have you, that they can reach out and have that partnership with you.
Well, I
and
value
Kentucky
it
Spin
a lot.
And so again, to contact you, the number is
800-525-7746, or our website, www.kyspin.com. Give us a call, or you can send us an email, and we would be glad to help.
Okay, all right.
So,
thank you again.
Thank you.
And this has been Rhonda Logsdon, and she's the Assistant Director with Kentucky Spin. And I'm Carol Gault, and I've been your host for Easter Seals today. And I want to encourage you, if you would like more information about what you've heard today, you can go to the college's YouTube channel, and you can access that at paducah2.org. So thank you again for joining us here on Easter Seals today.